The reality is that his opinions can be given even by the people posting on Facebook. If you follow the method of Abu Layth, you do not need those qualifications that he claims. Anyone can make those opinions because they are not based and grounded in any principles. So people here, everyone can say, I do not feel that swine and pig should be haram because it was in a. Let me give you an example of his reasoning. He hasn't said this, but someone can come out with this argument that pig was made haram only because in those days they never had freezers, and pig meat is prone to rotting very quickly in hot environments. Now we do not live in hot environments, and even if we do, we have freezers. Therefore, pig meat should be halal. This is the type of reasoning Abu Layth would use.
My point is, my conclusion is, I don't believe that eating pork is haram. And my first premise is all food was permissible to the children of Israel before the Torah was revealed, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So by this reason, you know, that Ibrahim, Noah, Joseph, everybody before they came before the children of Israel eat pork, or they were allowed to eat pork,
Sure.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sure. And then after that, when God sent down the Torah, God tells us a few prohibition on the Jews because they broke the Sabbath, and pig wasn't there, like lahm al-khanzir wasn't there. They were just like, you know, the fat of the goat or whatever, and at the back. And I don't know if you remember the list. So
yeah. I mean, so there was that which chewed the cud, and they were allowed to eat certain, you know, that which was hooved and chewed the cud. Yeah. So those animals which ruminate their kind of food.
Right. And but if you look at the Torah, you'll see like, oh, shrimp is haram for them. Crab is haram and all that. But I don't believe in that because I think that's just man-made or fabricated. I believe that the Quran was sent down to kind of solve all their dispute. So for me to believe pork is haram, because also God says like the Muslims can eat their food and marry a woman, talk about the Jews and the Christians, right? And when God never mentioned pork for them, and I can eat their food, doesn't that make it a contradiction if we prohibit pork for us and not them? You know what I mean?
So okay, I mean that's a good question right now, because there's a bunch of questions there that are kind of like tied together. One is one is that there would have been a time, or there would have been people, unquestionably, to whom pork was not haram. And I'm pretty sure that must have been the case, you know, like, so I doubt it from the time of Adam alayhi salam, things were haram like that. Although I don't know where the pork tahrim began, were there some prophets, for example, that also told their people pork was haram? It could have been, but we just don't know. I don't know. Nobody really knows because we don't have that message. But we do know the Israelites, definitely, for them, they got that message that pork is haram. Now, most likely when pork was made haram, it was made haram for a particular reason. Yeah. So it was made haram because, most likely because of the kind of food poisoning it was causing and things like this. This is most likely, this is speculation, but most likely the reason. Even till today, pork is often one of the few meats that still, if slightly undercooked, can cause dangerous food poisoning, unlike the other meats. So obviously beef is relatively very safe, but chicken obviously needs to be cooked, but not the way. So if you just even YouTube certain things, not religious things, you could just YouTube about sausages not being cooked properly, if they still have some pink in them, and how this could lead to a particular type of food poisoning. That's still today, even in the modern world. Now, so I do feel that this tahrim was mu'allal to do with harm that pork was causing. Then there's a secondary aspect. The secondary aspect is that, okay, now that it's been done in religion, it also can take on a ritualistic nature. a ritualistic nature. Now, the ritualistic nature is not the primary focus. It's not the primary reason, but it can serve a secondary step in this ruling. So pork, the prohibition of pork, for example, had this ritual element to it, also ties in with an identity element. This identity element has then become a worldwide global factor that oddly unifies, because it's symbolic of identity today. So for example, today circumcision and pork or abstinence from pork are symbolic immediately of Jews or Muslims worldwide. Now, I feel that that is still a very powerful marker, and one, therefore, that I would fully endorse, that, you know, that pork still, I would go with it being haram, even though I understand that if cooked well today, it may not carry those harms and it may not carry these things. But I still think that even identity and a sense of belonging are incredibly, in fact, I believe are increasingly more valuable in the modern world, where people are questioning identities and existential identities. So, yeah, I would definitely.
I have two things to say. Yeah, that's okay. But like for me, when I read lahman khanziran, right? So first of all, it's just the meat part, not
the
like
meat,
the bone,
as in to
fat.
eat it.
So,
right, as in to eat it.
So for me, I think it's better if we translated any meat that is, you know, disgusting or that it looks bad. You know, that makes more sense if you think about it, because, you know, the khanzir and we turn them into apes and khanzir.
At this point, the angels are going to be like,
oh yeah,
God, sorry, they're going to be like, God, sorry, there's I don't know if he was part of your plan, but he's got something that makes a bit more sense.
Right. I mean, God did say use your reason, right? So here we are. And also, like when he said identity, didn't God tell Adam like the best clothing is taqwa and not you know, like the shallow clothing or something like that? He could have given a clothing for us, but he said the best clothing is piety or something like that. So I feel like the sense of identity is just being like, you know, a good boy or a good woman. You know, do the good, be just speak good, all
you
that.
see, no, because like what you see, there's, I'm not sure. Okay, it's you see, because the problem is there's so much that has to be. Some questions are very simple, but the answers to really give a thorough understanding, or to give some meaningful impact, there's so much that has to be said, which is a problem, because then it becomes a handicap kind of perspective, because the question is so simple, but there's some. You see, identity, I'm not talking about just simple, obvious biological markers in the sense that this is a boy, this is a girl. I'm talking about you know, as the world opens up to more and more comfort and luxury, it frees up more time to think. Yeah. Now, as the mind starts to wander, it finds itself all of a sudden in a labyrinth of existential angst. It's not like how, you know, if you just had to work hard for a living, like you just had to go to the farm and just work, and you wouldn't have these, you wouldn't even be worried about these questions of identity, or because you are still at a survival mode. Your mind has not been granted the luxury to philosophize. As this world has entered an age of amenities, we now find ourselves with these philosophical conundrums, and they are terrifying for people. You know, they are terrifying. So I do find that there is a human need. I feel that psychologically speaking, there is a human need for the sacred. I definitely feel that, whatever that the sacred is, but there is a fundamental need. So if you look at atheists and you look at people who are outright militant atheists, now that the decades have gone by and atheism, you know, first it was sharply, you know, it was like out there fighting all the, you know, they were out there, bang, 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 the age of Hitchens and these people. But now that it seems to have stabilized, if you listen to these dialogues that they have, they now speak of the vacuum in their lives because there isn't the sacred. So they try to come up with substitutes because the human psyche seems to have a longing for the sacred. So I feel that we do have certain things in Islam that are the sacred, and they have already been provided. So that's one that it fills a void. It is a commandment that exists in scripture. It also provides a unifying global identity marker. You see, Muslims, wherever they are in the world, they do not eat pork. Now, you may say, well, it's a bit meaningless. And that may be true, but identity is very powerful. You see, I can't explain the power of identity in just a few words. You'd have to look into psychology and the incredible kind of studies that have been done on what the problems with identity and how they lead to crises in life. And your crisis might be something else, like you might be struggling with all these things, but it ties into your own identity crisis that is going on. And I don't mean, you see, when I say identity crisis, you see, the problem is these things are also hijacked by modern day. Oh my God, identity crisis, wearing a T-shirt, identity crisis. No, I don't mean it like that. I mean it at a deeper spiritual level. Okay, they're at the psyche, at the level of the psyche. So to me, these markers are incredibly powerful. I would say, if religion was made up, if religion was to be made up, the person that came up with these things was an infinitely incredible genius, because he hit the mark. Like, you don't understand how powerful, because to come up with an icon that is actually quite easily refrainable, like you can easily abstain from pork because you don't have an instinctual need for it.
No, I don't.
So no, human beings don't. Not you. Human beings don't. You see, human beings don't have an instinctual need for a craving for pork. You may have had a cultural, socialized craving, whereas, you see, you have an instinctual need for sex. You have an instinctual need for certain things, but you don't have it for pork. You have it for food, but not pork. So it's actually a very easily so within reach, yet so powerful in the emblem that it serves within identity. I think at this stage of life, you probably don't appreciate these things, but when you walk a certain amount, you walk down the road of life and meet people and see things and see struggles, you understand, like how Da Vinci said that the greatest form of that simplicity is the highest form of sophistication. That actually the most complex things are those that could be put out so simply. And this is one of those things that I don't believe it's man-made, but I would say for atheists who feel that religion was just man-made, this was one of the most genius things from their perspective that somebody has ever pulled off. That they've managed to unite people and create a sense of belonging that is global, based on such simple markers that are easily actionable. Whereas saying something like, you see, if I said to you, you have to do something which is actually hard, that is not a unifying global fact. Like if I said, don't commit adultery, that can never be an identity marker. Never. It's impossible for that to be an identity marker, because you see, it clashes with the human instinct. Two, human societies, even if they embrace that as a morality slogan, they will never embrace it as an identity marker. It just doesn't. Human beings, you see, anthropology doesn't work that way. It's not enough to create an apparent identity, whereas food is, surprisingly, and the abstinence from food is even easier of a marker. Because you see, it's a passive step. So these things like pork, I know, you see, you're looking at it from the aspect of, oh, well, okay, I can cook it well today, it won't poison me. But I see in it elements of immense sophistication that are so simply executed that people worldwide, like a Muslim, where you're seated, New York, there's a Muslim in Australia, there's a Muslim today, let's say in South Africa, there's a Muslim in China, I'm here in, in the UK, somebody in India, somebody in Pakistan, somebody in Russia.
Right.
All sharing, there is an aspect that, for example, if you came in touch with each other, you would have certain factors that immediately unite you. And you would say, yes, of course, Islam, but you would also see practical elements. You see, this is why the Prophet said in the hadith that he who faces the Qibla.
Right,
yes,
yeah.
Now that's it. Now, you see, okay, that is fine. That's a belief aspect. But then he said, وَأَكَلَ ذَبِيحَتَنَا, and he kind of abided by our dietary rules. فَذَلِكَ الْمُسْلِمِ, because thereby what the Prophet could have said was a uniform, but he didn't. He could have given a different social aspect, but he gave one of dietary regulation, because it's easy wherever you are. Like, you can keep your culture, you can have food the way you want to have food, but there's a simple thing that bonds you and binds you with others worldwide. I actually think it is quite, it's intricately amazing and well sophisticated. But I understand your question. But I would still endorse this ruling. I would still say that even if people could say that pork today, if we cook it well, it won't be poisonous, it won't be this, I would still see the power in abstaining from it, whether it's from the ritual side, whether it's from the identity side, or whether it's simply from in the sacred, in the need of the psyche for the sacred, which, to be fair, there are other sacreds in Islam as well. That's not like I'm just saying.
Yeah,
but,
no, I get that.
And the sacred is also a prohibition, you see, because the haram, which is the sanctuary, is also the haram, Masjid al-Haram, the haram mosque. Why? Because, and like you see in China, the forbidden temple, because the forbidden also has this, the sacred to it. But yeah, I think we get distracted, and these discussions.
No, that's a nice perspective, actually.
But I appreciate you saying that, because it's given us this opportunity to discuss this.